Welcome. Thank you for joining our session today. If you're here to learn about expanding the reach and access of Vision Zero through regional agencies, you've come to the right place. Vision Zero is not just for big cities. It can be a really impactful strategy for rural and suburban, for small and mid-sized communities as well. And often a really critical aspect of the expansion of Vision Zero is coordination at the regional level by agencies who are in a great position to provide data, provide technical expertise, and importantly, to provide funding. So our panel today highlights 4 regional agencies who have shown early leadership and early success in their approaches to Vision Zero. We have with us Contra Costa County Transportation Authority, Pinellas County, Florida, Oregon Metro, and Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So my name is Dana Weissman. I'm the moderator for today's session. I'm a senior associate at Fehr & Peers, which is a multimodal transportation planning and engineering firm. I've supported a number of agencies across the country with their Vision Zero programs, and every community presents distinct and exciting opportunities, and it's particularly rewarding to work with regional agencies who are in such a unique position to shape safety outcomes across a really wide geographic area, and to make those safety outcomes accessible to all communities, even those with fewer resources. And so really thrilled to share with all of you the great work these panelists have been doing. For today's session, we'll spend the next 75 minutes together, starting with introductions from the panelists. We'll do a short participant poll to allow all of you to introduce yourselves to us. And then this will be followed by a facilitated discussion where I'll pose questions to the panelists, and then we'll wrap up with Q&A from the audience. So we encourage you to type your questions into the question box as they come to mind as the session goes on, and we'll address as many as we can during the Q&A at the end. So with that, I would like to turn it over to our first panelist. Let's start with Sarah, if you want to kick us off.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Caper with Forward Panelists. We are the Metropolitan Planning Organization and Planning Council for Pinellas County, Florida, which is in the Tampa Bay region. Our 2 largest cities are the city of St. Petersburg and the city of Clearwater. And we began doing a Vision Zero effort about a year ago. It's called Safe Streets Pinellas. And one of the first things we wanted to do with the public was a large summit to be hosted in March, which, given COVID, was postponed. And so we spent a long time thinking about how do we engage the public and how do we have meaningful input given the current times. So we did a lot of social media and outreach campaign virtual. We've also been working with a 16-member task force with a range of participants, not all of our usual ones, as an MPO, to help us develop an action plan. We have developed a high injury network and hotspots that we're in the process of finalizing. We've been also taking a look at countermeasures, both engineering and non, and how do those work with everything that we're doing. One of the key features of our action plan is our 4 demonstration projects that we're in the process of doing right now. And we're using the demonstration projects to test different countermeasures, performance measures, and also engage with our community partners, especially the Florida Department of Transportation, Pinellas County, and the local governments to see how does Vision Zero work in Pinellas County, how can we work together, and how can we tweak what we're thinking about so that when we have the action plan, we're ready to have things happen. Thank you. I look forward to speaking on the panel today.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Colin, you want to jump in?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Colin Clarke. I look forward to your questions and hearing from your perspectives. In transportation planning at the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, my responsibilities include countywide mobility for all ages and abilities of 1.2 million residents, including people bicycling, walking, and using electric mobility devices. I joined the CCTA team in July 2020 and began my career in public service in 1999 in my childhood hometown of Union City, California, in the East Bay of San Francisco, which is also home to CCTA. So CCTA was formed by voters in 1988 to manage the county half-cent sales tax, Measure J, for transportation improvements. The voters chose to tax themselves and create our small but mighty pea shooter organization of less than 20 people. We're very fortunate that we're allowed to be very innovative because our board is forward thinking and supportive of this approach. And our first priority is safety. And because it would be crazy to think that if we keep doing the same things the same ways and somehow get a different approach or a different result, that's why we're changing the approach itself to safety in terms of a systemic approach to safety. And so instead of reactive, we want to have a proactive systemic approach to safety. So you'll hear me in our session today talk more about our Vision Zero planning. And what I really appreciate about our agency is that this isn't just a plan that's going to sit on the shelf. It will be implemented. We do have dedicated sources of funding to address safety. So looking forward to this discussion today. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Colin. Lake, take it away.
Good morning, everyone, or it's good morning on the West Coast. My name is Lake Stronghart McTighe, and I'm a senior regional planner at Metro, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Portland, Oregon region. And we serve about 1.5 million people in a 3-county area. And I'm going to share my screen real quick. I've got one slide for today. Hold on one second. And everyone can see that?
Yep, looks great.
This is for my introduction. So we have recently in 2018 adopted our regional transportation safety strategy. And similar to the other panelists, we have adopted data-driven policies and actions. We are using a proactive approach as well. So the safe system approach, really focusing on targeting fatal and serious crashes first. Our plan and strategy centers equity. We are focused on funding safety projects. We have over $900 million worth of safety projects planned in our regional transportation plan. We recently allocated over $60 million in our regional flexible funding allocation for projects that improve safety. We're very focused on managing speed, focused on infrastructure versus behavioral change. So while that's really important, we are focused more on the systems. And we have a Vision Zero target for 2035. And because we're the regional agency, and in Oregon, all plans, local plans must be consistent with the regional transportation plan. When this was adopted by our regional council, this means that all of our cities and counties within their region have also adopted the 2035 target. And I just want to point out really what we're focused on is, you can see in the top chart here that the Portland region has one of the lowest fatality rates of any metropolitan area in the country. And this is really, I think, due to a lot to our land use decisions, compact communities. We have lower vehicle miles traveled per capita than most places. But at the same time, our traffic deaths, especially pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries, the trend is going up. And so we have to keep the focus on reducing these fatal and serious injury crashes. And not letting up until we do reach zero. We'd love to reach it before 2035. We know it's going to be a big lift, but our council and our communities are really committed to it. So thank you very much. I look forward to speaking with all of you today. And now let me figure out how to unshare my screen. Okay, thank you.
Shruti, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Shruti Hari from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which is the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the San Francisco Bay Area region. Now, I oversee 2 key programs at MTC. One is the brand new Regional Vision Zero program that I'll talk to you in a little bit about. And a second program I oversee is the region's asset management program, where we are responsible for ensuring that the region's transit operators, cities and counties maintain our transportation assets in a state of good repair with the goal of optimizing safety, reliability, and operational efficiency for the transportation network, especially for our riders from a rider perspective. Now, a quick overview of the Vision Zero program itself. It is a brand new program for us, for our region. And our main goals here were to bring three things: bring regional leadership to safety in the Bay Area region, an approach that could coordinate across several stakeholders essential for this effort. And thirdly, to be able to balance inequities and imbalances across multiple jurisdictions. And when I say multiple jurisdictions, the San Francisco Bay Area has a lot. We have more than 100 cities and towns across 9 counties and 12 urbanized areas. Now, so far on this effort, which has only recently started taking off, we've adopted a regional Vision Zero policy for the very first time in the Bay Area region and adopted 3 rounds of ambitious safety targets in an effort to send out a message that safety is really important to us. Now, we are currently also working to establish this regional safety program that would rely on a 3-pronged approach to safety in the region. So firstly, we are working on enhancing the regions and local jurisdictions' access to reliable and consistent safety data in the region by integrating several available safety-related data sources into a single safety data repository. Secondly, we are hoping to be able to use this data to inform and develop regional policy and support legislation that has been proven to be effective. And finally, and dependent on resources available, we hope to support the local jurisdictions by providing technical assistance with safety planning. And to sort of illustrate that, I have a couple of slides here, and I will quickly share those with you. So this is the, hopefully you guys can see my screen. This is the 3-pronged approach that I was talking about. The data would be the foundational piece, of course, which will inform a lot of our policy initiatives, which is the second aspect of our program. And then based on resources available, provide technical assistance to our local jurisdictions that range from like the San Franciscos of the region, who are really leaders in safety planning, to the really small jurisdictions who do not have a safety program or the resources to build one. And I quickly want to show here a visualization of the safety data system that we are in the process of building out. So what this data system would do is combine or integrate several available safety related data sets around the region. So if we were able to work on cleaning up the crash data and combine it with roadway infrastructure data and other demographic data at a minimum, we would be able to develop a good quality high injury network map that would enable us to essentially identify, isolate, and analyze critical traffic safety issues in our region. And we would start from there with the policy initiatives and the technical assistance. So that's all I have in terms of a brief intro to the program and myself. I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Great, thanks, Shruti. All right, so now we'd like to learn a little bit about who's joining us today. So we're going to do a quick participant poll, which Julian will be setting up and sending out for us. So there it is. So please take a moment to respond, and then we'll take a look at the answers. Julian, are you able to put the results up on the screen for us so we can see? Great. Okay, so about a third of the participants are from a local jurisdiction. Great. We do have some regional agencies, about 20%. About a third of our participants are from the community or advocacy organizations. Excellent. And we have a little under 10% private sector, and then a same amount from none of the above. So good mix. And then in terms of topics people are most interested in, we see a lot on policy legislation, which is great. We'll speak to that. Data and technical resources, have a lot of great resources on that. Strategic partnerships, I see equity, good. We have a question that we'll cover on that. And then a little bit on funding and some of the non-engineering needs. Okay, great. Thank you everyone for participating. So now let's dive into the questions. So we'll spend the next 40 minutes or so going through a handful of questions for our panelists, and then we'll integrate some questions from the audience. So again, feel free to type your questions in as we go along. So first want to talk about a challenge, I guess, that could be called that's really unique to large regional agencies. And that's the fact that these regions are very, very diverse, which can make it difficult to develop safety analysis or develop resources that resonate across the various place types. And so question for our panelists, how do you approach this challenge in your Vision Zero programs? And what are some lessons that you've learned that might help others address it as well? And so I want to start with Sarah for this one.
Thank you. And so we are the Metropolitan Planning Organization for one county, Pinellas County, Florida, which is fairly diverse. We have the barrier islands with beach communities. We have a couple of larger cities and then a lot of smaller ones in unincorporated area. One of the things that we've been doing to try to address some of those differences in different areas is look at an interactive map we had open for the public. So members of the public could let us know where they see concerns. And we use that to look at what types of concerns we're seeing in different areas of the county. And we're in the process of developing personalized results for each of our local government partners so that they can see what people are saying specifically about their area. We're also testing the demonstration projects I mentioned in my introduction. And we decided early on to do a different demonstration project in a different area of the county. So for example, we're going to be doing one on the beaches communities. We're doing one in St. Petersburg. We're doing one in northern Pinellas and one in the central part of the county, so that each of the different communities can get an idea of what it might look like in their area. And then also just hear a little bit more about what we're finding in their area. When we looked at our crash data, we also broke it out based on the different local governments so that they can also see not only what people are saying, but what the data is saying to get an idea of how we might be able to help all of our partners in our diverse region.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Colin, can you respond to the same question?
Yeah, thank you. So in Contra Costa, the county has, the countywide area includes 19 cities and the unincorporated county community areas as well, everything from very urban to suburban to rural. So in that sense, it's diverse in that way as well. And so as we put together the Vision Zero working group, we wanted to be as inclusive as possible and make sure that we partnered with our public health department, given that this issue of traffic fatalities and severe injuries has become an epidemic and a public health crisis. And we've also made sure that our Vision Zero working group includes the California Highway Patrol, CHP, and law enforcement at the local level as well, because really this is a very multidisciplinary effort. Everyone needs to be involved, included from the beginning to be part of this programmatic effort. And with Contra Costa Transportation Authority, we're developing a how-to guide for jurisdictions for how to address Vision Zero. And that will, it is something that we want to work very closely with our local jurisdictions while also working with our regional partners at MTC. Shruti, we're lucky to have here today, that we're collaborating with from the regional perspective of the 9 Bay Area counties, and from the regional funding perspective, as well as meeting ambitious statewide goals for greenhouse gas emissions reduction, all kinds of stuff. And from the local jurisdictions perspective, we're at the countywide level, we're balancing those and coming up with a toolkit of actions that are based on common collision types that we're seeing countywide and in different localities.
Great, so I'll pause for a minute and allow any of our other panelists to jump in if they'd like to as we transition to the next question.
Sure. I'd like to quickly jump in for a second here and echo what Sarah and Colin said. So the San Francisco Bay Area, again, is extremely diverse. We definitely have a good mix of urban, suburban, and rural communities. We have 9 counties, as Colin mentioned, and like more than 100 cities. And one of the things that we, sort of similar to what Sarah said, that we are planning to do as we build our data system out, is include how like when users access the data, so for the dashboard, so maybe include a standard regional dashboard summarizing traffic safety in the Bay Area, as well as have an interactive map widget that would allow an end user, which could be the San Francisco or a really small local jurisdiction, that would allow this particular end user, based on their profile, to generate a separate unique dashboard with data and resources to enable them to advocate for and implement safety countermeasures in their own community. So that specificity, that being able to take into account their local context in order to generate their own dashboard so that they can view the data that's relevant to them, hopefully would help towards that. And also in the back end, we are hoping to account for the diversity of the region in the way we analyze, narrate, and visualize the data. And we are planning to engage this diverse set of stakeholders early in the process and engage them throughout the development of this regional safety data system and the dashboard as well. So ultimately, we can address the needs of these various users across these various agencies. I just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Shruti. Great. So we all know how critical partnerships are for a successful Vision Zero program. And so I want to ask our panelists who have been your most critical partners, either inside or outside of your respective agencies, in helping you advance your Vision Zero goals across the region. And what strategies have you found to be most effective for collaborating with your member agencies? And related to what we were just talking about, how do you tailor your approach to member agencies that vary in size and likely available resources? And so I'm going to pose this one to Lake first.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we've really taken the approach at our regional agency that without partnerships, it will be impossible to implement our ambitious Vision Zero strategy. And so there's a wide variety of partners and partnerships that we have, and they play different roles, all of which are critical. One critical partner has been our elected leadership. This is both at our elected regional council and then our Policy Transportation Advisory Committee, which is made up of mayors and county commissioners, city councilors, et cetera. And by adopting our Vision Zero strategy, these elected bodies really made a commitment to implementing pretty ambitious plans and policies that we have around safety. And so having that leadership has been really important. One of the things that we have been doing is providing it's very sobering, but providing a fatal crash update to these elected committees every month and letting them know the status of fatal crashes in the region for the previous month. And the reason we've done this is really to denormalize traffic violence and to highlight that this is an ongoing problem, to keep it at the forefront of our elected officials and other leadership, community leadership, at the forefront of their minds, so that when they are deciding, making big decisions on funding and planning and design, that this is part of their consciousness as they're making those decisions. Another really important partner has been the city of Portland, which is the largest city within our region, and it has been a leader in Vision Zero. And having the city really take the lead and show how they are implementing and really dedicating a lot of resources and time to Vision Zero, taking it very seriously, has been really important. The public is really important. We've gone out with polls and surveys and focus groups, and safety is consistently the key focus that the community has. And so being able to, refer back to and say, this is really important to the public. And yes, there may be some trade-offs that we're going to have to make, but the community wants safe streets for people walking, biking, taking transit, and driving. And then finally, I'll just wrap up by saying that advocacy groups are really critical for sort of bringing that additional sort of shining additional light on this issue of traffic violence, and our local agencies. We have who are working on their own safety strategies that are addressing the sort of local issues within their city or county boundaries. All of these partners, in addition to many other private companies, police, fire, et cetera, and I will talk a little bit more about the role of police and how we're addressing enforcement, because it is a critical equity issue. But all of these partners are really important to implementing our strategies. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Lake. Shruti, do you want to add anything?
Sure. So, I mean, sort of similar to what Lake mentioned, definitely the most critical partners, the way we are looking at it as an MPO trying to foster a culture of safety in the Bay Area region, are definitely our cities and counties who would be on the ground implementing these safety projects and policies. Again, as Lake mentioned, partnerships are key. So we view cities and MPOs both having different but complementary strengths for improving safety in the region as a whole. And an ideal situation in our mind is one where both the MPOs and cities are committed to action, especially in regions that do not have a single central city like the Bay Area that could benefit from an MPO providing direction and expertise to the smaller cities that comprise the majority of people. I think equally important, again, Lake touched upon this as well, are the safety advocates, community groups, nonprofits that focus and advocate for equity and the safety of vulnerable population. And they would be very critical to partner with to understand on the ground safety challenges. And we need to ensure at the regional level that investments related to safety and health promoting active transportation, I guess, are targeted to communities most in need of them. And that would, I think safety advocates and these community groups would really help with that. Now, the state for us would be a critical partner as well. So connectivity between the state and locals, we are hoping to be the bridge between Colin and other cities and local jurisdictions who are doing safety efforts with the state, so that we could have like that connectivity for plans, targets, and safety policies, which would be especially important for bringing in funding to the region. So, so not only do we need the state's leadership in this, but also FHWA, and maybe look at how all of our efforts at the regional, local, state, and national level fit together, where we all may be focused on sort of different parts of the safety problem, but in the end, they would all fit together as a system. And again, the public is really important. We have like really ambitious goals, and for that, we need lots of people coming together. Policy and decision makers, of course, are really important. They need to be on board, as political will would be really important for a safety program of this scale. So just leave it at that.
Great, thanks. I'll give Sarah and Colin a chance to jump in if they'd like, as I transition to the next question.
Thanks. I'll just add that one thing we found as we started to work on our Safe Streets effort is that MPOs have lots of committees and lots of people engaged with us. And one of the things we wanted to do with our effort was to engage other non-traditional partners. And so our task force, we kept it 16 people, which includes health planners, emergency management, the business community. But we also asked each of our existing committees to designate one representative from that committee who can act as a liaison and bring their own perspectives. So, for example, the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the Citizens Advisory Committee, each have one person on our task force that can bring back some of the ideas between committees that already exist, and then meeting with some of our other partners who can help us reach different groups and different perspectives that help us have a better Vision Zero action plan.
Great. So thinking about the strategies that your communities have implemented, what have been or do you anticipate to be the most impactful Vision Zero technical resources for the communities in your regions? And relatedly, what innovative safety treatments are you currently piloting or evaluating across your regions that could be utilized by your member agencies? So Colin, I know there are a lot of great examples coming out of Contra Costa County, and you want to kick us off?
Yeah, thank you. And I want to acknowledge the question in the chat box too, which is related to this in terms of crash analysis, rapid collision analysis, and hopefully near real time. So CCTA was fortunate enough to be one of only 8 agencies nationwide to win a U.S. Department of Transportation automated driving system grant. And we're also home to Gomentum Station, which is the largest secure testing grounds for autonomous and connected vehicles. And so we're using it to ensure that new transportation technologies have a place where they can get tested to their limits in a safe and secure location without endangering the public. So I think having access to Gomentum Station is huge for public-private partnership in terms of being able to test pilot treatments, and also being able to address the safety of people of multimodal backgrounds. And innovation is something that really drew me to CCTA. There's a long history of innovation there, and with the ADS grant that I mentioned, the automated driving system, the idea is hopefully to address metrics in a more proactive way. And when it comes to close calls and skidding, for example, we're going to have sensor data from the vehicles that come from the vehicles, go to a central location, and if a pattern is recognized in terms of maybe multiple vehicles in a very short period of time skidding, for example, in a same location, then it'll be kind of a red flag to, for example, our public works professionals to be able to be notified that there's a potential pattern of some kind that's perhaps worthy of additional investigation, perhaps even a field, a site visit if there's no camera available. I think looking forward, one of the things that would be really exciting to see as a public-private partnership is, delivery vehicles that are on our streets often and frequently. If we could partner to have, video cameras on the bottom of, each vehicle and have it recording to a central database somewhere, and using AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, other algorithms to in near real time, but also temporally, longitudinally over longer periods of time, be able to analyze pavement cracking and other things so that we can address issues before someone is severely injured or killed. So that's kind of what we're trying to bring to this effort as well.
Thanks, Colin. Sarah, I know you also talked about demonstration projects or pilot projects in your introduction, hoping you could speak to this question too.
Yes, thank you. One of our demonstration projects, we've been able to test different types of technologies that we've heard from our partners, from the local governments and the Florida Department of Transportation they might be interested in. So we worked with a video analytics firm at an intersection where we heard from our interactive map where the public could submit their concerns. There was a lot of concerns at a particular intersection. So we worked with this video analytics company to install cameras there for a couple of days and just see what was happening. And we were able to confirm a lot of what we were hearing, a lot of what we thought, but now have video with documentation of speeds that we can then show people, yes, this is happening. And we were able to work with Pinellas County and the Florida Department of Transportation. They're making some changes to the signal operations. And then we're going to be doing an after of that intersection to look at if that made any changes. Another demonstration project, we're actually going to be out on Monday. Pinellas County and the city of Clearwater are working with us to install a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, an RFB, at a location where a bicyclist was killed in a crash in May of 2019. And Pinellas County had already done some research, conducted speed analysis, looked at crossings to put in the RFB. But what we're going to be doing is working with them to promote it and provide people educational opportunities on how to safely use the RFB. We'll also have a speed gun out so we can look at what speeds there are, also document if people are stopping when people hit the button to cross. So a range of different things that we can work with our government partners on.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And before we move on, I am going to turn it back to Colin to share a little bit about some of the analysis they've done at the countywide level that serves as a resource for the local jurisdictions. Colin, are you muted?
Yeah, so are you able to see my screen of the pedestrian priority areas?
Yes, and hear you.
Oh, that's great, thank you. So for the Vision Zero effort, that was one of the main recommendations that came out of the 2018 Countywide Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan, which identified these pedestrian priority areas. That allowed us to focus our analysis on where there were more common collisions, which you'll see in the slides after this one. But first, I want to briefly mention that we did use artificial intelligence on a countywide level from Ecopia Tech, being able to identify sidewalks and crosswalks countywide to develop the inventory and be able to identify gaps in the network and those types of things. And in terms of collisions, you can see the different high injury corridors in terms of frequent concentration of bicyclist involved collisions in this case, and in pedestrian involved collisions in this case. And so there's a very small percentage, as you can see here, in terms of roadway miles that are responsible for a large majority of fatalities and severe injuries. And these are some of the common collision attributes and types that we're seeing in Contra Costa County. And just on the innovation piece, again, I think, 10, 15 years ago, sustainability was one of those concepts that really came to the fore again and helped us look at the way we do business in a different way and make sure that everyone, no matter what kind of field you're in, we're all thinking about things differently. So I guess in terms of innovation, something that I would encourage us all to think about is, instead of having an innovation office, we're all responsible for innovation of some kind and Vision Zero and safety. And so it's a real cultural shift, paradigm shift in terms of the way we do business. Architects, engineers, planners, policymakers, legislators, law enforcement, public health officials, you name it. And so, try to carve out some time every week or every month to be able to, think differently and, no bad ideas. That's definitely encouraged.
Thanks, Colin. I want to just bounce it back to Sarah briefly, since we got a question from the audience about how the Pinellas County demonstration projects are funded. So I thought, Sarah, maybe you could jump in and respond to that before we move on.
Sure, thank you. The demonstration projects we worked into the action plan. So when we procured our consultant for the action plan, they had the demonstration projects included. We are funding our action plan with two major sources, the MPO's grants that we receive, and also funding that we have as the Pinellas Planning Council. I will say for some of the demonstration projects, we are receiving some additional funding or matches from our local government partners. So for example, Pinellas County was already installing the RFB. And for some of the other ones, we are working with the local government if it's something that we are unable to do with our funding.
Great. I want to give Lake a chance to jump in as well, and I think she'll also speak to a question that we got from Amy from Boulder County, which is a good one about actions taken in the short term. She's wondering if any of the panelists or really anyone in the audience who wants to contribute to this chat are working with the rapid response crash team for more recent crashes that occur kind of today. And so she's hoping to hear about anyone familiar with rapid response crash analysis teams or ideas on what that would look like. So Lake, please feel free to chime in.
Great. Yeah, I just wanted to mention around technical resources. I think, speed is a big issue, and not just speeding. I think someone brought that up in the chat, but high speeds. So even if it's a legal speed, it can still be deadly. And I think one of the most helpful technical interventions we can use are posted fixed speed cameras and fixed red light running cameras. And these are still illegal in a lot of states. They are not legal in, they're only legal in a couple cities in our state. And that's one of our big focus areas, is to make these available to any city that wants to utilize them, because as a pilot project, the city of Portland has been implementing them, has 10 deployed, only 10. When you think about how many New York City has deployed, we could do a lot more. And the results are just really stunning in terms of how much speeds are reduced. So I would just say that that's a really important, not new technology, but one that's not really being deployed very as much as it could be. Other things like advanced PED signals, signals that detect bikes and show bike riders that they've been detected by a signal are really critical. There's so many technologies out there that are, ready, that have been tested, that we're just not utilizing enough of. And then in terms of the rapid response teams, I think this is such an important tool that is not being used enough. The city of Portland does have a rapid response team that they send out, and they go and they, understand what happened at the crash scene. And they send out planners and engineers along with police. And I would agree with one of the people that said that, speed is underestimated. I would absolutely agree with that. Even at the scene of a crash, speed is only seen as involved if, people are speeding, and often only like 10 or more miles above the posted speed limit. So I think that that is something that really needs to change, and we need policies behind that to start showing how we understand, was speed involved, whether or not it was a legal, posted speed or speeding issue, was speed involved in the death of the person, whether walking or biking or driving. So I think, rapid response teams, that could be something that could be, there could be a lot of different participants in those. And I think that if they were used more broadly, they would really start to change the way we think about crashes and how to prevent them. Thanks.
Thanks, Lake. And that's a nice transition into our next question for the panelists related to policy and legislation, a topic that a number of you are interested in hearing about. So, question to the panelists: what do you see as the role of regional agencies in advancing safety legislation at the state level? And what strategies have you found to be effective, or even what really has not been effective for you in your regions? So Shruti, start with you.
Sure. So this is one area in my mind where MPOs can make a huge difference, as we can lead a concerted effort and we can carry the clout of a much larger population. Now, MTC has the ability, also being an MPO and a regional agency, to convene key stakeholders and facilitate regional discussions of safety issues and the policies and legislation that would be most effective in those circumstances. And in our discussions with our local jurisdictions, two areas came up. One is the automated speed enforcement, so sort of lending our support to that, and the ability for cities to set context-specific speed limits. Now, the speed issue will keep coming back. When we're talking about safety, we cannot not talk about speed. And as Lake mentioned, she talked about how do we capture that speed information. But maybe I'll talk a little bit about speed-related legislation that we've been trying to help enable in the region. So as you all know, globally, speed is one of the biggest causes of traffic crash deaths and serious injuries, contributing to close to 1/3 of fatalities. It might be even larger. There is clear evidence supported by statistical analysis that traffic fatalities and serious injuries increase with individual vehicle speed. So apparently a 5 mile per hour increase in the maximum speed limit was associated with an 8% increase in the fatality rate on interstates and freeways and a 3% increase on all other roads. Unfortunately, we are going in the opposite direction. In the United States, speed limits have been rising since the 1990s. And again, current procedures in California for setting speed limits rely on the 85th percentile methodology, an approach that was developed decades ago for vehicles primarily on rural roads. And although California has become heavily urbanized and its roadways have changed significantly, reflecting sort of different modes of transportation, including bicycling, walking, and scooters, the method for setting speed limits has not been modified to reflect these changes. And the issue here is that the 85th percentile methodology relies on driver behavior, and 85th percentile speed remains the primary factor used in determining these posted speed limit, regardless of the intended use of the street. So what MTC is doing is working with our cities and the state to gets greater flexibility for cities in establishing speed limits, and this would offer agencies an expanded toolbox in order to better combat these rising traffic fatalities and injuries, especially for our most vulnerable roadway users. And consistent with international trends, other US states like Oregon, Washington, New York are also enabling the cities to lower speed limits, exploring alternative methods to establish speed limits based on local context instead of the 85th percentile speed. And we are working towards that. We've made some progress. It hasn't happened yet, but that's something that we are working towards, as well as automated speed enforcement. So maybe this year or next year, we are working towards seeing some amount of success in that.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that. Lake, did you want to add anything to this question?
Yeah, I'll add briefly. We have, so in our regional, in our government, we've really taken a look at how we can support legislation. So since our Metro does not own any roadways, nor do we, have direct oversight over police or anything like that, we have taken the approach to defer to local jurisdictions to introduce legislation while we will then go in and support it. We having adopted policies in our regional transportation plan around safety are so helpful. So if you don't have those at your MPO, I really recommend trying to get an adopted safety strategy, because we point to that when we go forward and advocate and lobby for legislation like legalizing fixed speed cameras. We also recently, we actively supported our state DOT to change their approach to setting speed limits. And as typical to many state DOTs, they use the 85th percentile, or have been. That's not a state law. Really, engineers can use any type of method, but they have always used the 85th percentile. Recently, that's been changed to a more, now we actively supported a change to use a context approach to setting speed. So really looking at surrounding land use, moving down to a 50th percent speed profile to help inform speeds, but really also having target speeds and design speeds that are consistent with land use. So much lower for city centers, neighborhoods, things like that. So in terms of legislation, This is such an important area. We know that once something is put into law, it's much easier to implement. Once something is legal, it's much easier to implement. So while right now our council is not introducing any legislation typically around transportation safety, we do have a policy in our legislative framework that supports safety and equity in transportation. And we will go out and advocate for policy or any kind of legal changes that are consistent with our adopted policies. Thank you.
Great. Give Sarah and Colin a chance as I transition to the next question. So Lake just mentioned equity, a really important topic in Vision Zero, something that came out in the participant poll that all of you are interested in hearing about. So we'll transition to that and give all of our panelists an opportunity to speak to this important question. How are your regions proactively integrating equity into your Vision Zero programs? And related to that, how are you thinking about enforcement and the role of education and encouragement as complements to or replacements for enforcement strategies? So I want to start with Colin for this one.
Yeah, thank you. So in Contra Costa, we're baking equity into the process as integral to, one of the core elements of Vision Zero is equity. And we can think about it in terms of, the unfortunate data that we're seeing is that people of low income, people of color are disproportionately affected by fatalities and severe injuries. So being able to focus our efforts to address these issues first, developing a model policy for jurisdictions to be able to adopt at the local level. And one thing that we've done as a result of the bicycle and pedestrian plan that resulted in our Vision Zero efforts was focusing on bicycle and pedestrian involved collisions first before vehicle to vehicle collisions. And so all of that is important. And I mentioned the ADS grant and some of the work that we do at Gomentum Station that does address vehicle to vehicle as well as multiple modes. And yeah, I mean, we've been making sure that we're being as inclusive as we can with all the different stakeholders to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table for the Vision Zero planning process.
Thanks, Colin. Lake, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, this has been a pretty key topic, at least at the staff level and at the City of Portland level. So the City of Portland in their Vision Zero strategy, which was adopted in 2016, did not include any enforcement actions at all. And this was really in direct response to community input around concerns with bias in policing and disproportionate impact on Black people in our community in particular. Excuse me. So the city, I think I need to get some water, Dana.
Yeah, of course. Sarah, can we have you jump in while Lake grabs the glass of water?
Sure. So when we were developing our countermeasures, our engineering and our non-engineering countermeasures, we were thinking about including equity and enforcement, and decided with our task force not to do either. And regarding equity, we felt that equity was important to include in everything. And let me see if I can share my screen with you. Show what it looks like. It doesn't look like it's working today, but I think the files will be available so you can see that we know our communities of concern are much more impacted by crashes, especially the KSI, the killed and severely injured crashes, than other communities. And so it's something we felt very strongly should be part of everything we do. when we think about Safe Streets Pinellas. So we are including it as an overarching theme throughout our action plan. And then regarding enforcement, we felt that enforcement really, the things that we care about most related to enforcement aren't enforcement related. So for example, Lake mentioned the automated speed cameras. They are not legal right now in Florida. And so really that's something we had thought of as a potential enforcement countermeasure that really belongs in legislation. And so we found that there are other ways to incorporate elements of enforcement that we felt were most valuable in education, in legislative, and that enforcement itself really wasn't a countermeasure category for us, the same way that equity really is involved in everything.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Shruti?
Sure. So this is again another area where I think MPOs can make a huge difference. And as cities make their, efforts in their own jurisdictions, MTC can sort of strive to keep the focus on equity and encourage and support and incentivize equity in safety policies. Equity is definitely one of the main pillars of our Vision Zero policy. Even beyond that, equity is really important to our agency under the leadership of our new executive director. And the way we are incorporating that right now is equity related data would be one of the key data sets that we would be integrating in our data system, along with crash data and infrastructure data. And we're hoping what that would do is shine a light on these disparities and recognize the concentration of traffic safety problems and the patterns of disinvestment and underinvestment in certain communities. So we're also hoping to include an equity weighting for a high injury network to identify these underserved communities. But then documenting these disparities and acknowledging them is a focus of, is a basis, I guess, for focusing solutions, but that alone would not advance equity. And we are going to be working on, we haven't yet, because we're still in the data system development phase, develop and implement strategies to address the conditions that created these traffic safety inequities in the first place. And we, as I mentioned before, we will be working with our local jurisdictions to ensure that investments related to safety and active transportation are targeted to communities most in need of them. I do want to quickly touch upon enforcement. It is not a focus area of our, and it is not included in our policy. And I feel like unless we make significant progress on figuring out equitable traffic enforcement, I'm unsure that as traffic safety advocates, we can pursue for more enforcement. So I think it'll end up being more engineering and education rather than enforcement, and also supporting legislation like automated traffic enforcement that can hopefully help mitigate police bias. But where they are positioned, how they are used are still going to be important considerations. We need to be careful about, or cities rather, would need to be careful about how they administer these traffic fines so that they don't overburden these low-income drivers and encourage more resentment of police. So I guess I'll summarize by saying enforcement is not a core part of our policy. And I think we are working, or we will be working more to elevate engineering and design and education in the safety framework for our region.
Great, thanks. Lake, I'm going to pass it back to you to pick up where you left off.
Thank you. And I think I just echo what Shruti just said. We are definitely taking the approach right now around enforcement that advocating for interventions like fixed speed cameras that do remove more of the bias, and that we just cannot support enforcement actions when there is such a disproportionate impact on our in our communities. And we really, there's research backing this up. We have studies, Walking While Black, that, drivers do not stop for Black people, especially Black men, at the same rates that they do for white pedestrians, for example. We have in our county here, one of our counties, there was a study looking at police fines for traffic violations, and fines were twice as high for Black residents. So that type of disproportionate impact is unethical, and we really need to address it head on. I just want to share one thing here, just again, kind of talking about policy. This is a map of our region, and just quickly, the darkest areas are where we have the highest populations of people of color. So that's Black, Hispanic, Asian, low income, and low English proficiency. And then those are our fatal and serious crashes overlaid. And the real big takeaway is that while 56% of our population within the region live in these regional equity focus areas, nearly 70% of pedestrian fatalities and over 70% of serious pedestrian crashes, and over 83% of bike fatalities occur in these areas. One thing we really need is more data on who is dying in crashes around race and ethnicity. And we know this is a tricky area and really, needs a very careful approach. But we need to know more about who's being involved in traffic crashes. We do know from death certificates from the Oregon Health Authority in our state that Native Americans are dying at over twice the rate of white people and other races in our state. Again, that's unethical. And then Black Americans are dying at nearly twice the rate. Black people are dying at nearly twice the rate as other races. It's also higher for Hispanics. So this is again just really showing that there's such a disproportionate impact, not only from traffic fatalities, but also from enforcement. And this is an issue that I think no one has solved. We haven't solved it, but it's something that we have to really take a close look at. We do have policies around equity in our strategy. We directly address equity in our policies. I think they could be even stronger, and we'll look at that at our next regional transportation plan update. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Blake. So I want to bring in one final kind of topic area, which is investment prioritization. And this came in a question from the audience from Marco, related to a question that I actually had for the panel as well. Marco's question was, has adoption of a regional Vision Zero policy led to significant shifts in project prioritization? Has this created political challenges, for example, with deprioritizing roadway capacity projects? And relatedly for the panel, how have your regional funding priorities and strategy priorities shifted due to COVID? So what is different now, and how does that affect the safety work of your agencies? So Blake, if you want to start us off there, keep going.
Yeah, I think we're just still really coming to terms with the potential for changes to traffic due to COVID, and trying to understand what that, what we need to do to address it. We've seen in our region, we did see an initial drop in fatal crashes, which we get, we have more recent data for fatal crashes. We did see a drop in fatal crashes as well as fatal crash rates. I don't think that was true for a lot of other places in the country where fatal crash rates actually increased due to COVID. There's a lot of concern that with less trips being made by transit, potentially into the future, and more the driving could increase, and while biking and walking are also increasing, that could really increase the risk for people walking and biking. So there's some concern around that, and I think that we're really supporting local efforts to change streets, to make pedestrian only, bike only streets, to increase the width of biking facilities so that people have more places to walk and bike during COVID, and really support those types of infrastructure. We think that with our funding, regional funding, that we might be able to support more pilot projects to do temporary installations for things like well done, but temporary installations for protected bikeways. And this is really going to be important on our major arterials, which are also all frequent bus routes. That's where people are really, doing a lot of their walking, and we want to make those places safer for walking and biking. So we don't have any it's all still pretty new, and we're still grappling with the data and also the fallout of the impacts to our transportation systems due to COVID. So there's still a lot of just sort of discussion as people are working through these issues. I think, overall, consistent with our policies for the last 10, 15 years, we are continuing to support more funding to go to biking and walking and safety, and emphasizing those modes and safety for those modes, because we know it makes the road safer for all users, including people driving. So it's continuing to just build on those policies, and then working with our transit agencies to ensure that transit is safe for people to use, and then as it's safe, to really encourage that. I can't talk about it now because it's on the ballot, but we do have a transportation funding measure that, if passed, would include a lot of funding for transit youth pass and biking and walking. So we'll see how that goes. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Blake. Colin, do you want to add to this one?
Yeah, so in Contra Costa, as it relates to COVID, over the last couple months, we've been working on an allocation plan in terms of post-COVID and what that might look like as our sales tax revenues change as a result of changing spending patterns and a recession, and how that ends up looking. And so we're closely monitoring the sales tax revenue and how that affects our ability to fund projects in the near term and longer term. However, the good news is that, as we've gone through this allocation planning process of developing scoring criteria and ranking projects, our bicycle and pedestrian projects still ranked highly. And so we still will be addressing safety, because in some sense, COVID hasn't changed our priority in the sense that safety is the top priority. But I do think that, our way of thinking has definitely been flipped on its head this year, in terms of, this is the time for innovation. This is time to rethink the norms, or what the norms were pre-COVID. And so, to Lake's point, this is a great time for living previews. This is a great time for outdoor dining being used in the streets, in terms of getting businesses back on their feet. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. Sarah or Shruti, do you want to say anything about investment prioritization?
So I'll quickly jump in and just take a quick second here and say that we've only just begun this effort, and we've already started to see challenges around prioritizing safety projects over roadway capacity increasing projects. So because there is an ingrained culture that we have been sort of like used to for the last few decades, and that culture is what we are at the MPO level hoping to change and shift in our region. And working with the state, and the state has safety as a top priority now, but at the lower levels, we are still seeing at the operations levels that some of this is not trickling down to the folks that work with us on a day-to-day, or the local jurisdictions on day-to-day projects. So that we want to form that bridge and shift that culture towards safety in the region. And maybe I'll report back in a year or two and see how successful we've been in that.
Great, thanks. So in our last 5 minutes, I want to pose a surprise question to the panelists that I think could be helpful for all of the local jurisdiction representatives in the audience right now. And it's just what kind of one piece of advice would you give to someone from a member agency, a local jurisdiction, on how best to utilize their regional agency, whether it's a county or an MPO, to help them advance their own local jurisdiction's Vision Zero program and goals? I'll give you guys a minute to think about that, but feel free to jump in.
I would say outreach early and often.
you want to say a little more about that, Colin?
I wasn't sure if this was a speed round.
Feel free to embellish.
Yeah, it's really important to make sure that it's an inclusive planning process, because it touches so many different fields, industries, and the way that we all do business. And because it is such a cultural shift in some ways. So making sure that the working group that is set up is more representative of the community. On the issue of enforcement, for example, working with law enforcement so that personnel and staffing more closely represents the demographics of the community. All of those types of things are important.
Great, thanks.
I'll just chime in to say, and kind of getting at one of the questions in the chat, is focusing funding on safety projects. So, and it's helpful if you have adopted policies and plans to support this. But one of the things we did was I actually identify and call something a safety project in our regional transportation plans. And it took quite a bit of work for us to come up with a definition of a safety project that everyone in our region could agree on. Anything that adds roadway capacity was typically not a safety project. So it had to really address a specific safety problem and use proven or innovative countermeasures to address that problem. And that helped us to really say, this is how much we're planning on spending on safety. And is that enough? And we're going to use that as a way to go back to our decision makers and say, this is how much we've been spending. And this is where we're at with our fatal and serious crashes. Do we need to make some adjustments? So we want to see, actual funding going towards these safety projects. And we want to go towards quicker, easier to implement safety projects, not that 30 years down the road, massive, roadway improvement project. We want to address projects as quickly as possible. And so I would say that's something to really focus on, is being able to identify how much you're spending on safety and then track it over time.
Thanks, Blake. Shruti or Sarah, feel free to jump in if you'd like to.
I'd say the biggest thing that comes to mind in a lot of our conversations is just having strong and open communication. We've found that we've had really good conversations with our local government partners about what we're seeing, what they're seeing, and we've been able to work together to make projects happen and to build on all the resources we're already investing, sometimes together, sometimes separately, in different safety projects or other projects where we can add a safety feature. And so by working together to strengthen our community partnerships, we've been able to do a lot more and also show success that helps the others in our community also do different projects.
And just to add to that, we are going to be doing a lot of workshops in our region, and related to the outreach that Colin was mentioning about, is getting these Vision Zero cities together with the smaller cities, having them all share best practices with each other, maybe provide some safety toolkits to these cities, other resources like consultant assistance, which we haven't yet identified the funding for, but down the line, we want to be able to provide consultant assistance to these smaller jurisdictions that do not have the technical expertise of the larger cities. So provide data to them, and then through the data, once they figure out what the safety projects are, from an equity lens, from a safety lens that need to move forward ASAP, provide consultant assistance and actually identifying countermeasures and then implementing these projects on the ground.
Thank you. All right, so that takes us to 10:15, the end of our session. Thank you, all of our panelists, such leaders in this space, really role models to look up to, and really appreciate all the work you guys have been doing. So thank you everyone for joining us. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.